اوكي بونجور يا حلوين، كيفكم؟ ان شاء الله يا رب تكونوا بألف خير، تكون الامور يا رب هادية بإذن الله، ونرجع قريبا يا رب لصفوفنا لمدرستنا. بهذا السيشن نحن حنتناول اوبجيكتيف جديد. هذا الاوبجيكتيف حيحكي عن type of chemical reactions نحن اوريدي شفناهم بجريد 9، حنرجع نشوفهم بتفاصيلهم بجريد 11. اوكي، انا بعثت على التيمز تو experimental activities: experimental activity 1 experimental activity 2. اليوم حنبلش ب experimental activity 1، وحسب الوقت والتسجيل يا اما بندخل على activity 2 يا اما بناخدها طبعا بسيشن جديده ان الله راد. كويس، خلينا نروح سوا على هالاكتيفيتي experimental activity 1 which describes a reaction between magnesium and hydrochloric acid, which is of formula H++ Cl minus and magnesium in the form of a solid, it's Mg solid. First of all, we add the magnesium strip into a hydrochloric acid solution. We agitate or stir, and after that we record our observation. I think إنه كلنا شفنا بالفيديو the emission of what of a gas or effervescence of what of a gas. Stopper the test tube for a few minutes. Okay, we close the test tube for a few minutes and we bring a flame close to the mouth of the test tube. And again, we write our result. We noticed a detonation test where a pop sound is formed, and this, as you remember from your grade 10 lessons, this is a test for what? For hydrogen gas. At the end of the gaseous emission, okay, filter the contents of the test tube and collect the filtrate. And to the filtrate, we add the drops of sodium hydroxide solution and A++ HO minus. Again, I sent you a list of identification tests of some ions, of some important ions, okay? And the most common ion, one of them is the magnesium ion Mg2+, which can be tested or identified by hydroxide ions HO minus by producing what? A white precipitate as shown where in the video, in your video. Okay, so let's describe the experimental activity starting from the initial state to the final state. What about my initial state? Initially, I introduced a piece of magnesium in the solid state to a solution of hydrochloric acid consisting of hydrogen ions and Cl minus ions, so H plus aqueous and Cl minus aqueous. What about the final state? According to our activity and identification tests, so my final state consists of a gas identified to be hydrogen and magnesium ions according to the identification test done by sodium hydroxide. What about the Cl minus? Okay, as you know, according to Lavoisier principle, matter is neither created nor destroyed, but changes from one form to another. So initially I had H plus, which is transformed into hydrogen gas, and I have magnesium solid, which is transformed into Mg2 plus ions, whereas nothing happened to Cl minus. No changes take place on the ion Cl minus, and this is known as a spectator ion. No changes, no transformation. So the reaction mainly takes place between the hydrogen ions, H plus, and the magnesium solid Mg to produce hydrogen gas and Mg2 plus ions or magnesium ions. And this reaction is represented by the following equation. Magnesium solid plus hydrogen ions H plus in the aqueous form they are present in solution to produce Mg2 plus ions aqueous since they are present in my solution and hydrogen gas. So this is the overall equation. Let's balance this equation as usual. We cannot write any equation without balancing. I have magnesium transformed into magnesium ions, and I have H plus hydrogen ions transformed into hydrogen gas. So simply I have to add the coefficient 2 so that my hydrogen is what is balanced. My hydrogen atoms are balanced. اوكي خلينا نشوف نحن شو اللي صار. مثل ما مذكرين انتم من صف السكوند من صف البروفي سابقا. Let's talk about the magnesium solid which is transformed into magnesium ion, cation, okay, with a charge 2 plus. So simply, okay, the magnesium solid had lost 2 electrons, okay, losing, it gives 2 electrons. So for magnesium to be transformed into magnesium ion, simply 2 electrons are what are lost. عم يصير عندنا transformation from the neutral state of magnesium, okay, to a cation. As you remember, the cation is formed after losing electrons with a charge of what? Of plus 2. So simply, this magnesium solid had lost 2 electrons. ونحن مثل ما بنعرف we write the electrons in the product side to represent the result. يعني أنا صار عندي magnesium ion, okay, وصار عندي 2 electrons which are given or lost, okay, by what? By magnesium solid. What happened to these 2 electrons? وين راحوا هال 2 electrons؟ بمحل تاني إذا برجع to my reaction اللي أنا شايفته فوق. The H plus is transformed from a cation, from an ion with a positive charge, okay, to a gas which is neutral, hydrogen, no charge, okay. So the H plus ions are transformed into hydrogen gas from, let's say, plus 1 to a zero charge, a neutral diatomic gas. طيب كيف صارت عملية هالترانسفورميشن؟ simply had 2 electrons اللي أنا شايفتهم lost by magnesium simply are gained by what? By hydrogen. بس نحن شايفين H plus وحدة أنا حسب ما أنا كاتبة وأنا عندي هيدروجين غاز. يعني الهيدروجين غاز simply هو 2 atoms of what? Of hydrogen which are linked together by a simple covalent bond, as you remember from your grade 9 and grade 10 lessons. So I have 2 atoms of what? Of hydrogen linked together again by a simple covalent bond. And I have 2 electrons which are set free, okay, or lost by what? By magnesium. H plus, it's 1 ion. كل H plus gains 1 electron. But how many hydrogen ions can gain had 2 electrons? فإذا I need 2 hydrogen ions. Each hydrogen ion gains 1 electron. So in total, I have 2 electrons to produce what? Hydrogen gas. The electrons lost must be equal to the electrons gained. فإذا I have 2 electrons lost by magnesium, 2 electrons gained by what? By the hydrogen ions to give or to produce hydrogen gas. So simply أنا عم شوف عملية transfer of what? Of electrons. وإذا منراجع الفيديو كتير منيح منلاحظ إنه emission of a gas or emission of hydrogen gas بعد عملية identification takes place on the surface of what? Of magnesium. Okay? على السيرفس. بليز ارجعوا احضروا الفيديو وتأكدوا كتير منيح من الobservation. So إذا منراجع الفيديو كتير منيح بنلاحظ إنه a transfer of electrons take place on the surface of contact between magnesium and the hydrochloric acid solution. يعني عم لاحظ ال bubbles of the gas, the emission of the gas start من the surface of what? Of the magnesium. So simply هيدا transfer of electron برجع بقول takes place على surface of contact between magnesium and what? And the hydrogen ions اللي هن present in my hydrochloric acid solution. So the transfer of electrons خلينا هيك نحطها نوت مشان ما ننساها. Okay, so the transfer of electrons takes place on the surface of contact between magnesium solid and the hydrogen ions. So خلينا نرجع نشوف شو صار عنا. Simply برجع بأكد صار عندي عملية transfer of what? Of electrons, okay, from the magnesium, which is losing electrons, to H plus ions, which is gaining what? Which are gaining hal electrons in order to produce the magnesium ions, which are identified by sodium hydroxide solution, and the hydrogen gas, which is simply identified by the detonation test or its pop sound when a flame comes close to it. This type of reaction, where transfer of electrons take place, is known as a redox reaction. So, a type of reactions is known as a redox reaction. The redox reaction consists of two types of reactions. First is known as oxidation reaction, and the second is known as a reduction reaction. What about oxidation? Oxidation is the reaction which involves the process of losing electrons. So oxidation is the process of losing electrons. It is represented simply by the Huff equation, okay, where loss of electrons take place. فإذا خلينا نشوف مين كان عنا عم يعمل هال loss of electrons. كان عنا المغنيسيوم عم بيصير في loss of electrons to produce again magnesium ions and what? And 2 electrons. This half equation. This is a part of the reaction. Okay, لأنه I have another part which includes gaining of what? Of electrons. So this part of reaction is known as oxidation half equation. So هنكتبه مرة تانية. Magnesium producing Mg2 plus ions and 2 electrons. This is known as oxidation half equation. What about the second part of the reaction? Okay, another part of the reaction which takes place simultaneously at the same time. So magnesium loses electrons, and at the same time H plus ions are gaining these 2 electrons. So we say that these 2 half equations, okay, the oxidation and the reduction take place simultaneously at the same time. What about my second half equation? Okay, my second half equation, it's presented as follows. I have again each hydrogen ion gain 1 electron, but simply I have hydrogen gas which consists of 2 atoms of hydrogen. So 2 hydrogen ions gain 2 electrons to produce what? Hydrogen gas. Hydrogen ions in the aqueous form present in solution, and hydrogen gas, okay, evolves or emitted from the solution, because at these conditions it is not soluble in the solution. Okay, so this half equation, the second part of my reaction, this is known as reduction half equation. So in redox reactions, I have two, let's say two reactions are taking place, which are taking place simultaneously at the same time. The first one is oxidation, loss of electrons, and the second one is reduction, or where a process of gaining electrons takes place. And in such cases or in such types of reaction مرة تانية هنرجع نأكد على الفكرة اللي بتقلي number of electrons lost by one of the chemical species is equal to the number of electrons gained by the second chemical species, as you can see from the two half equations. 2 electrons are lost by magnesium and 2 electrons are gained by what? By hydrogen ions. طبعا في some reactions هنشوف الموضوع فيها شوي مختلف، هنشوف كيف نقدر نسيطر على هيدي الطريقة وشو بنقدر نعمل in order to show that number of electrons lost are equal to the number of electrons. I can symbolize electrons by E with the negative sign. What gained. So مرة تانية I have a redox reaction. The redox reaction consists of 2 half equations, 2 parts, let's say. The first part is the oxidation half equation, where loss of electrons occur or take place. The second one, gaining of electrons take place, and it is known as a reduction half equation. The electrons lost by one of the chemical species is equal to the number of electrons gained by the second chemical species. In this case, مثل ما نحن شايفين، خلينا نرجع للأوكسيديشن half equation. what chemical species is losing electrons. خلينا ندقق أكتر لأنه في تلاميذ كتير أوقات بتضيع، بس قول كلمة مغنيسيوم بيفكروا بال Mg و Mg2+. لا، خلينا نظبط اللغة الكيميائية. Our chemical language. Mg solid, this is magnesium. Whereas Mg2+ ions, okay, these are ions in the aqueous medium, magnesium ions, not magnesium. So when I say magnesium, I mean in the neutral state, zero charge, in its natural state, which is what? A solid. Okay. Whereas magnesium ion, it's a charged chemical species, and in my case, it has two, this is هيك Mg2+. فإذا my Mg is losing electrons to be transferred or transformed into what? Magnesium ions. Mg, magnesium solid, lost electrons. It undergoes oxidation. هي اللي عم تلعب هيدا الدور. Okay. هي اللي عم بتقوم بهيدي المهمة. هي اللي خسرت الالكترونز. The reactants هن اللي بيعملوا oxidation أو reduction. What reactants? The reactants initially introduced. I initially introduced a magnesium strip where in hydrochloric acid solution. So أنا بس بدي أحكي عن الأكسيديشن، بس بدي أحكي على الريدكشن، بدي أفكر بالمغنيسيوم solid، بدي أفكر بال H+ ions. So magnesium lost electrons. Magnesium undergoes oxidation. لمين خسرت الالكترونز؟ خسرت الالكترونز، خلينا نرجع لفوق فوق فوق. خسرت هالالكترونز اللي عندها اياهم تتعطيهم لمين؟ للاتش بلس، يعني هي عم تشتغل لمصلحه الهيدروجين ايونز. اوكي، فنحن هون بنسميها it's the reducing agent. So Mg solid is the reducing agent, or simply we can call it the reductant. reductant هيك نظبطها شوي مشان انتوا عم تكتبوها على دفاتركم. اوكي، reductant. Again, magnesium undergoes oxidation, the process. It lost electrons. It lost electrons in order for the H+ ions to gain these electrons. So it acts as a reducing agent or what? Or a reductant agent. هو اللي بيشتغل لمصلحة حدا تاني. اوكي، العميل بيشتغل لمصلحة حدا تاني مش لمصلحته. So the magnesium lost electrons لتشتغل لمصلحة مين؟ لمصلحة ال H+. ال H+ هو اللي عم يعمل reduction. So H+. وبنرجع بنأكد على الاكسيديشن reduction كل هالبروسيس. Reactants are involved. The products are only a result. يعني magnesium lost electrons to produce the magnesium ions. H+ gained electrons to produce hydrogen gas. اليوم أنا عم شوف المغنيسيوم عم تخسر فتعطي ال Mg2+. بكرة يمكن شوف ال Mg2+ عم تربح لتعطيني مين؟ لتعطيني المغنيسيوم. يعني كل وحدة منهم بتلعب دور حسب هي مع مين. فإذا اليوم نرجع لتاني رياكتنت اللي هو ال H+. ال H+ مرة تانية أنا عم بكتب أكويس لنتعود عليهم، بعدين شوي ممكن أنا غض نظر عن هيدا الموضوع. H+ gained electrons. فإذا gaining of electrons, the process of gaining electrons أنا بقول it undergoes reduction. So the process taking place by H plus ions is what is reduction. So H plus is the oxidizing agent. Oxidizing agent. Why؟ لأن هي عم تشتغل لمصلحة الأكسيديشن تتقشطها الإلكترونز. يعني المغنيسيوم عم يشتغل لمصلحة ال H+، وال H+ عم تشتغل لمصلحة المغنيسيوم. Okay, so H+ is the oxidizing agent, or simply it is known as what? As an oxidant. أنا كيف عرفت كل هالقصص هاي اللي أنا شايفتها أنا وياكم؟ simply عملنا هالأكتيفيتي الزغطورة واستنتجنا الريزلتس اللي طلعت منها، تقدرنا نعرف كيف عملية الترانسفورميشن عم بتصير. يعني إذا برجع أنا بكتب my overall reaction: magnesium solid reacting with hydrogen ions. نحن اليوم عملنا balancing بهيدي الطريقة السريعة اللي هي let's say trial and error. بكرة كمان حنشوف أكتر، وهلأ يمكن مش بكرة، أوكي، حسب الوقت. to produce okay to produce magnesium ions Mg2 plus and what? Hydrogen gas. So simply the magnesium loses electrons to what? To hydrogen ions in order to be transformed into a stable ion. Okay, so the magnesium ion is a stable ion, it's a stable cation, whereas H plus is transformed into hydrogen gas. مرة تانية خلينا نشوف الترانسفورميشن ونشوف هالكونسبت كيف أنا طلعت بهالأوفر أول. magnesium gives magnesium ions after losing 2 electrons. Hydrogen ions gain 2 electrons because I have 2 hydrogen ions to produce hydrogen gas. مرة تاني these two reactions take place. معلي عم نضلنا نعيد، معلي I know، يعني لو كنا بالصف كان الوضع مختلف. معلي خلينا نعيدهم كتير مشان كل مرة انتم عم تحضروا الفيديو ضلكم بالجو. فإذا these two half equations take place simultaneously, which means at the same time, simultaneously. 2 electrons are lost by magnesium, 2 electrons are gained by hydrogen ions. So the electrons lost equal to the electrons gained. The two half equations simply can be added to get the overall simplified equation. مرة تانية Cl minus doesn't appear in my equation because it is a spectator ions. No transformation occurred على هيدي الchemical species. Nothing. So it is known as a spectator ion or indifferent in water. So by adding the two half equations, Mg plus 2H plus producing Mg2 plus what? Hydrogen gas. So in my overall equation, no spectator ions appear, no electrons appear. Okay, electrons must be cancelled because the electrons lost are equal to what? To the electrons gained. So simply they are cancelled. This in the product side and this one is in the reactant side. So again, what do we call this reaction? This is known as a redox reaction. What about magnesium? Magnesium is the chemical species which is losing electrons. It undergoes مرة تانية oxidation. So magnesium is known as the reductant. Reductant. What about H plus? H plus gained electrons to be transformed into hydrogen gas. It undergoes reduction. So H plus is the oxidant. So please بدي ارجع اطلب منكم تحضروا الفيديو، ترجعوا تشوفوا experimental activity 1. انا ما حتقل عليكم كثير بهيدا السيشن، حوقف عند هيدا البورت تضلكم تعيدون ونفهمهم كثير منيح. وانا ناطره اي اسئله منكم على التيمز على الشات. اذا اي شيء مش واضح بليز نبعت السؤال. و see you in the next session in Allah رأي.